From the outside, it looks like just another unit on an industrial estate. Next door are the offices of a waste management company. Just opposite, there's a big warehouse for the clothing store Peacocks, and down the road there's a retail park and a multiplex cinema. And talking of cinema...
So, we've walked into a vast industrial unit. I'd like to describe what's in it, but there's that much to describe.
You know that scene at the very end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Ark of the Covenant is boxed up and lost forever in a gigantic warehouse? Well, that's exactly what this building is like on the inside.
I can see old, what looks like an old combine harvester, old farm machinery up on a split level.
This is the National Museum of Wales's collection centre at Nant Garw, just off the A470 north of Cardiff. It's where they keep all of the exhibits that aren't currently on display.
There's old railway signs, I think, or old shop signs, everything's old. I think you can take that as written, but double-decker buses in the other room. Trolley buses, yeah. It's kind of a remarkable collection of machinery. I think that would be... There's a cannon over here.
The reason I'm here is to take a look at one of the last surviving examples of the first computer to be made in Wales, the Stantec Zebra, built in Newport in the late 1950s and early 60s, and to reunite it with two of Wales's first computer programmers, Noel Cox and Rod Delamere.
Looking straight at us, the old days there. The central console, as it used to be.
I'm Adam Walton, and today at the Science Cafe, we're telling the story of how the age of computing first came to Wales.
So that's just part.
Only part of it, yes.
That's right, yes. Yeah. Because we're looking at something that is...
There was a whole stack of racking, was all of the electronics that I don't see here yet.
Today, computers are ubiquitous, touching every corner of our lives. But there was a time when machines like the Stantec Zebra weren't taken for granted, when they were objects of mystery and fascination, and people like Rod and Noel were the high priests who tended them.
This is about 5 foot square somewhere, roughly 5 foot square, and this is just the control console. So
there would have been a desk, there would have been a paper tape reader, writer,
small printer
alongside.
And usually a paper tape punch reader punch as well.
That's right, yeah.
Somebody to edit and check and provide input and output to the system.
And Rod, what kind of emotional response do you get to seeing
all
these after all of these years?
Takes me back all those years, back to 1961 in my case, when I joined the Treforest. We had the Glamorgan College of Technology. Now, obviously, Welsh University South Wales, isn't it?
Yes.
Very first course in the whole country for computing, maths and computing.
Wales or the United
England,
Kingdom?
yes,
That's right.
The second one was Bradford.
Was it? Yes.
Yeah, they came the following year.
But what's your emotional response to seeing it? Because all of that, the history's kind of...
Well, a little bit undressed is this one, as this happens, from all the Formica tops and all the rest of it that used to be around it. But obviously, all these were, they had the lights, obviously, of course, that used to glow here.
Do you know what it reminds me of, Noel? And I really don't mean to be facetious, but it reminds me of the console on the TARDIS. And I think it's probably because it's got it's got the telephone dialer in the bottom right-hand
But
corner.
when you see something like this, and look at the advance of 30, 50 years, it's just tremendous.
Now that one there is 7 inches screen.
You've just got your tablet out.
My tablet.
Yeah,
that's right.
Compared to alongside.
You put it alongside that, right? There's a couple of punch cards.
Yes, that's right.
Now you've brought props for us.
Oh, exactly. That's right.
Yes, whole collection of things.
These were the storage media was on punch cards.
Right, yeah.
And there'd be thousands of these, right?
Yeah.
And you have to sort them into order and so on.
Well, we say, of course, because we don't understand, maybe because we take computers so much for granted
This was the main feature of the Zebra, was the fantastic speed, electronic speed, at which it could do calculation.
But why was it important? Why did we need to be able to do calculations at that kind of speed at that time in 61? What would that computing power have been used for?
Take a little example, maybe the weather. There's so many variations and possibilities of forecasting the weather that if they put those to the test by putting the answers of saying this high or that low is going to be in that position. So much information has got to go into it, and then they got to work out what likelihood is of the weather for the country.
They weren't using the Stantec Zebra for
They did in Canada.
Did they really? Because obviously
they sold one to Canada, and for years, right until the last, I think, it was used on that for that purpose.
Because we don't have computers now that can deal with chaos theory or all of the different systems, do we? Yeah. And Rod, there's a little, oh no, I mean there's a little speaker there. As well.
Yes, yeah, the speaker.
What was the speaker for, and what kind of this is a big piece of machinery.
Oh yes,
computers make noises. So what kind of a noise did it make?
Like the Doctor Who electronic music of the 60s, I think, when it first came out.
Because we're used to seeing noise, or hearing noises, very often these noises were just sort of given there just to confirm what was happening.
Yeah.
Right? It was working. Well, you take a digital camera, you hear a click.
Yes,
or the shutter shutting. There's no shutter.
Yeah.
But it just confirms in your own mind that something actually happened when you press the button.
Yeah.
It's just confirmation that everything's all right.
Our guide through the vast space of the National Museum's Collection Centre, the man leading Rod, Noel and me to the quiet corner where the Stantec Zebra sits, is Ian Smith, curator of modern and contemporary industry.
I mentioned that it's a little bit like, walking into the room at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It's just like that.
It is a little bit
just like that, yes.
Do you get that sense? I mean, obviously, this is much more interesting because it's not full of anonymous boxes. So amongst all of these historic artefacts and machines that we have here, why is this filing cabinet with its input console of import enough to be stored?
It is just so important. It's one of the first computers in the world. It was made in Newport, got huge Welsh connections, and it is an icon of its time.
That's right, yeah.
And amongst all of the other things, because obviously we can't go through everything that is here, have you got a particular affection for this, a particular sense of the Stantec Zebra's importance?
It is important. When I first saw it, when I first came up here and I saw it, it's massive. My dad actually worked for the gas board in Swansea, and I remember him coming home in the 60s and saying, I've been working on a computer.
Yeah.
And, it was something similar to that. It was a massive room. They used to go in, have the punch cards. They were working out the gas bills on it. And to me, that sort of rang a bell. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like something that I knew somebody who'd actually worked on one of these first things.
The Stantec Zebra was made in Newport, Corporation Road, and it was a machine based on designs by a Dutch computer scientist called Van der Poel.
John Tucker is Professor of Computer Science at Swansea University and curator of the university's History of Computing collection.
And he had got hold of documents that were circulating at the time.
What time are we talking about now? What year would
His
that
thesis
be?
was 1956.
Right.
And that was the output. The output of his PhD thesis was a design for a computer. He was working for a very famous Dutch computer scientist called Ad van Wijngaarden, who was a major figure in the development of machines in Europe. And in fact gave me a job for a few years. I knew him at the Mathematical Centre in Amsterdam. Anyway, Van der Poel was there, and he wrote this thesis, and it was picked up. And they built, I'm not sure how many, you'd have to check, but possibly as many as 40 of these Stantec Zebras. And they did all sorts of things. Cardiff University had one. In particular, Glamorgan University, University of South Wales today, at that time had a very pioneering course on numerical and computational methods. And the students in Pontypridd would be taught all kinds of techniques, and then they'd get on a little minibus and drive to Newport to run their programs.
When was the last time you would have seen a Stantec
1961. 1961. I did a short course on the Stantec Zebra in 1961, which was my first introduction to computers.
Back at Nant Garw, I'm chatting to Noel Cox about his days working with computers for the electricity board. Rod Delamere has vanished for a moment down another of the collection centre's many aisles. Then we hear him.
Many interesting turns.
Yeah. Oh.
Hello.
Bang. It'll work.
There's some mysterious banging going on in the other aisle. So we better find out what it is. Was the Stantec Zebra something that you would frequently have to kick, Noel? Or?
No, I only used it for a couple of evenings in 61 when I went to Newport on a short course. So I moved in quickly onto IBM systems.
At first we can't see Rod, then he appears apparently from within one of the Stantec Zebra's cupboard-sized memory stores.
No. The heart of this,
Rod emerges from behind what looks like a filing cabinet, but is full of...
this fella here, this is the heart of the matter. An electronic drum.
It looks like a flux capacitor for
Within-
anyone who's seen
You
Back
see
to
all,
the
all
Future.
all these wires here, they lead to a thing called a read-write head. And inside that drum, see the fulcrum there, is a drum that rotates at 6,000 RPM.
Right.
And when that drum is passing that head, it either writes information or it reads information from the magnetic surface that's around it. So you've got to have the main computer working out a number. Now, it can't hold on to that number because it's got to use the memory to calculate other matters. You've got to preserve that number.
Yes, yeah.
So you write it to one of those positions there. You hang on to that until you've done all the different components in the calculation. Then you add them together. Or
Right.
subtract them. Or whatever it is, divide them maybe.
Now,
and so on.
the coil that we're looking at, or at least,
Yeah.
I mean, that's got numerous little... I mean, what are they?
Yes,
Are
I
they
think
transistors?
I think it's 1,500 locations that you had for program steps, and 1,500 locations for data.
Right, and
And that was the limit. That was the total limit.
Well, so clearly a whole flood of memories about, and a lot about the technicalities of using the machine, but also from both of you, I think, a deep respect for what it could do.
Yes, oh yes, yes. Well, being one of the very first in the 50s with electronic speeds and terrific speeds, well, with its arithmetic unit, it could divide and multiply, and access here was about 10 milliseconds, which is about what you get today on some of the rather older computers. But we're talking about just milliseconds for accessing of information on this drum. So in its day, it was very advanced in speed. But for holding capacity of data, nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely nothing at all.
So a question then, Noel, about perhaps a modern equivalent, or what would come close to the modern equivalent in computing power would be invalid, because if you can't store the information, that's clearly one of the things that our computing devices can do, isn't it?
It's just a sheer volume and capacity to do things. Like we produce electricity bills, thousands of them a day.
Yes.
Now we used to have an army of clerks doing that.
Yes.
That was replaced by a computerized system.
Yes, because you were able
Very
to
basic,
to store
very much more advanced now, because now, of course, you sit at the end of a console on your desk, called a terminal, and you key in the data yourself. Whereas in the past, we'd have to get someone to punch the card,
Yeah.
which was a punch operator. So I wrote the instructions down on a piece of paper.
And then someone would
The punch
them into
card operator punched it in. And then we fed the punch cards into the computer system.
That's right.
And then you printed it out and got it compiled, and then you found new mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'd have to go back and alter what you'd done
Yeah.
and repeat the process.
Now, both of you are handsome gentlemen. You don't strike me at all as geeks. So, at what point within computer science did the or at least that stereotype of the geek arrive? Because this
Not
was cutting
really,
edge.
no.
This was
It
cutting
was,
edge new
yes.
technology. It must have been an
And
exciting
it was,
area
and
to work
as a young
in.
accountant, I saw that as the future.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I look back now, and what I saw then is so different from what I see today. And I got more power in my home computer system
Yeah.
than I had when I was in the office.
You're listening to the Science Cafe on BBC Radio Wales, and today we're telling the story of how, in the late 1950s and early 60s, computers first came to Wales. It's strange to think that computers have been around for long enough now for them to be the focus of historians and museum collections.
Well, what you're looking at is all that's left of the first electronic computer Swansea University bought.
Professor John Tucker curates Swansea University's History of Computing collection.
So on the front of this panel of the IBM 1620, put on much later than the time it was purchased, is the following notice in red. Students are advised not to adjust this equipment in any way. Anyone found doing so will be held responsible. this could prove expensive. And then it says, in case of fault, telephone 363.
363, not even an extension code or anything like that.
No.
So what was this computer being used for?
Oh, scientific calculations of a very simple kind. It's an interesting machine because it is something that sort of was born in the late 50s and had the property that you could interact with the program while the program was running. It had tape and all sorts of other peripherals, and it was used for all sorts of things. In fact, in the cabinet, as you see, you'll notice that there is a photograph of some people cuddling one of these IBM 1620s. And in fact, that is a newspaper photograph of people using that particular machine for typesetting newspapers in about the same year. So it had a very versatile behavior because it was a relatively cheap machine. In fact, it was so cheap that they really economized on the hardware and cut out all sorts of things that we would take for granted. In fact, they even cut out the ability of the hardware to do additions.
Oh, really?
So everything was software-based.
Yeah.
And it had various nicknames, some of which weren't very complimentary.
Okay. So
I think it's a lovely machine, and it's very 60s in design.
So this was the first computer at Swansea University.
Yes.
What were the first computers that came to Wales, John?
Ah, no. This is a very interesting question, and in fact, I really hope that one effect of your program is for all sorts of individuals to ask questions of their friends and family about what they know about how computers came into their lives. But I believe the first computer to come to Wales was a machine bought by the Steel Company of Wales in Port Talbot, and it was a Ferranti Pegasus.
A Ferranti Pegasus.
A Ferranti Pegasus.
Wonderfully evocative name.
Yes, indeed. And it's a marvellous machine. There are several still in existence, and indeed there's a wonderful copy of this machine in the Science Museum in London that has been restored. The Pegasus is a very famous British computer. They made about 40, and the one that Port Talbot bought was number 24, I believe. Number 24. And it was a jolly interesting story behind it, because some years ago I was speaking to some pioneers of programming in Port Talbot. It was bought in order to design the new steelworks, the Abbey Works.
To design
it.
Okay.
Right? And they started to have a complete new idea, a new conception of an important new steelworks that was going to be one of the top steelworks in the world, which, by the way, they achieved. So they had about 30 people doing complex calculations about how to make a steelworks. For example, scheduling the melting shop where the ore is melted down and so on. Anyway, so they had this 30-odd people, and I was having a lovely conversation with a man called John Dacey from Port Talbot, who I believe could easily be Wales's first computer programmer. Now, John used to write complicated programs to do simulations of things going on in this, understanding the melting shop. Later on, they worked on the design of the harbour and various other things they needed. And he would do this work in Port Talbot on paper. He would get on a train and go up to London for a week and run the programs at the British Steel Central Computers in Park Lane. Later it moved to Battersea, but this is in the 50s now, 1957 onwards. And after a certain amount of time, this became so important that the steelworks thought, well, we'll buy one of these Pegasuses that John is using, and we'll build a building and we'll put it in. So that's how Wales got Pegasus number 24. At the time of that steelworks, this enormously helped them get the job done and build a terrific steelworks that was the envy of Europe for many years.
Noel was mentioning earlier that they used to have people coming, having a look at these machines through the great big windows in the computer room and so on. And often on the window was this.
Achtung, you've got a German message.
Should I speak it to you?
I think you should probably at least translate it for us, Rob.
Achtung! Allen Lukenspiepers, das Computermaschine ist nicht für Fingerpoken or mitten graben. It easy schnappen. Der Springwerk, blowen fusen und poppen korken mit spitzen Sparken. ist nicht für Gewirken bei das Dumpkopf. Das Rubbernecken sightseeing, keep hands in das pockets, relaxen, and watch the blinking lights.
I'm imagining
often.
that's not technically correct
No,
German.
no,
Something's telling me that that's not technically correct
But it
German.
always used to raise a smile, didn't it, on
exactly,
the
that's right, yes.
on people that came to have a look at it.
As the people who were operating these mysterious machines that were drawing people to windows to peer at in awe and wonder, was there an awe and wonder that rubbed off on you? Did you have an allure?
You were sort of seen. You were sort of
yes.
seen as a bit special.
Oh,
Really
yeah.
though?
That's right. Yes.
Was it
yes.
it's a mystery line to drop?
It's a mystery world. To
That's
most people.
right. of
Were
course
the
it was.
typing pool particularly
It
impressed?
hadn't. Yeah.
But
Well,
no,
it
but it's a typing pool. I mean, we were still away from things like Word,
Yeah.
right? So they didn't feel impacted or concerned.
No, what I meant was, did it impress the ladies?
Oh,
Is actually what I meant.
Well, it probably impressed most people.
Yeah.
The senior, the managers, the senior staff, the junior staff, all used to come and look at this system.
The limited memory capacity of the Stantec Zebra was its downfall. Only 30 or 40 machines were ever sold, and the production of the first Welsh-built computer ceased in 1963. But it certainly wasn't the last Welsh computer. In the 1980s, the Dragon 32, manufactured in Port Talbot, became our contribution to the new home computer market. And today, of course, Sony's Bridgend factory produces the Raspberry Pi, a simple computer designed to get young people interested in programming and create a new generation of rods and knolls.
This is like A2, say, an A2 piece of paper that dates from, what did you say, 1993, 1994?
Yes, that's right.
Kind of time.
And I discover that Wales has another claim to fame in the history of computing.
And it was made in America for a popular computer magazine, and then republished here in Britain by a magazine called PC Direct.
In Swansea, John Tucker pulls out a magazine insert from 1993 that has printed on it a network of lines and nodes. It looks a bit like a London tube map.
It is a map of the internet.
Right.
The idea is that you're a reader of this magazine and you pull out this map and it's giving you tons of suggestions to go and explore this brand new thing called the World Wide Web. And since you have no clue where to go or what to see, why don't you use this map?
And it seems to have about, this is a very rough estimate, 30 to 40 nodes, and with sites coming off it, they're big red dots.
That's right.
And the reason that we have it out here, bearing in mind that this is a worldwide, a map of the World Wide Web, is that there are some sites, important sites, of particular Welsh interest.
Yes. In this little corner down here, there's a big node which says United Kingdom-based World Wide Web servers. And off this node are exactly 6 sites. One of them is Her Majesty's Treasury. They had a page. But 2 are of great interest to us. First, the Swansea University had a page. And in that times, the one page that we had was all about surfing. And the reason is that we got into the World Wide Web through the physics department.
Right.
And a colleague was in UCLA, it's the University of California, Los Angeles, and he'd seen this new software that had come out of CERN being used by the experimental physicists, and he thought, this is interesting. So he installed it on the theoretical physics machines at UCLA, got more interested, sent it back to his students, and said, play with this, get it up. So they did. When it got to Swansea, the postgrads, who had obviously an interest in it, decided, well, we'll build a website about surfing in Gower, which is what they did, and it registers on this big American map. But there's an even more intriguing Welsh connection in Cardiff, because Rob Hartrill, who was another PhD student in Cardiff in the computer science department there, he got terribly interested in this, and because he was interested in films, he collected all kinds of information about films that was on the internet, but not on the World Wide Web. In other words, they were in files that weren't rendered and displayed in a nice way. And he built a web interface. And so he had something called, I think, the Cardiff Movie Database.
Right.
And this lived for some years, and then it grew, and then it was commercialized by him. Then it was bought by Amazon, and it became the Internet Movie Database that virtually all of us use whenever we want to know about a film. And the origins of that
are in Cardiff University.
In Cardiff University.
This
and
fascinating.
Rob Hartrill. And may I say that at the first big World Wide Web conference in Switzerland in 1994, they had 6 heroes of the internet. One was Tim Berners-Lee. I won't mention the others, but one was Rob Hartram.
Of course, the internet was more than 3 decades away when Rod Delamere and Noel Cox first encountered the Stantec Zebra. I wondered whether they could have imagined in those early days just how far computers would come.
You couldn't see very far ahead, really. I mean, there were obviously great minds somewhere, and people like IBM, advanced mathematicians and so on, who started to devise all these systems. And you wonder where we're going next, because we can't envisage what's going to happen in 20 years' time. We haven't got the capacity to do that, but there are people who can.
It's all of this flood of memories and knowledge and respect and affection and some kind of, I think, probably memories of certain frustrations working with these machines. Is that flooded back now in this room, or in general life? Do you talk about this at any available opportunity?
No, not really. We look back and enjoyed what we did.
Well, yes, that's right.
No more than that, really.
That was the starter. That was the little love of my life at the time, was that Zebra.
When you say little.
Yes, well, a bit bigger perhaps, yes. But the love of my life was the old Zebra at the start, but it moved on.
Yeah.
Better things, better and much improved language to utilise for calculations, better applications too. In my particular case,
let's not talk like that in front of her.
I know. She might be sulking in the corner. That's right.
Well, I hope that it's given you. Clearly, it's given you some really, really positive memories. Coming and looking at these consoles that others amongst us might take very much for granted. Thank you for sharing some of your memories and some of the wonders of the Stantec Zebra and the computing technology that came immediately afterwards in Wales.